government and governance mostly doesn't live on chain right now. So to the extent that Peter, Dave, and to some extent Salim are aspirationally hoping that we're going to live in an utterly frictionless economy, it seems the elephant in the room is that all of this physical government apparatus and the court system and jams and methods for adjudication, these are all off chain. So I guess
let me take it.
Yeah.
Alex, let me take it there, because this is the conversation we had with Jeremy Allaire from Circle, in which I was asking him, when do you think we're going to see the first fully on-chain corporation, right, where contracts, payments, treasury, governance, and even all of the agents employed by that company are on the blockchain, right? And we have the explosion of a new corporate structure that's operating at light speed compared to everything else. Do you imagine we're going to have that? When could we have that?
I think you can go look at kind of the cool experiments in this would be MetaDAO. It was a futarchy decision market-based DAOs where you effectively, every decision that this coin does, or this group that holds the coin, is using a futarchy mechanism where, should we go invest in this or should we pay these engineers? Why? The way that these decisions market work is you're basically saying, if the market decides yes, then I'm willing to buy your MetaDAO tokens at price Y. So I'm willing to pay more for this, for Apple stock, if they go build, iPhone 20 or whatever. Or I'm willing, does that make sense? This is like the kind of, I would say, the closest thing you're going to get to full on-chain governance and corporate control over funds and assets.
Peter, I'd like to try to answer your question, but then forward a sub-question to Tully, if I might. I think the answer to your question relies on a sub-question, which is, when will we see, at least within the US, the first state government approve a new type of corporation that is an on-chain autonomous corporation? It would require an act of a state government at minimum. So my sub-question
to Texas or Florida, yeah.
Wyoming's been very advanced in crypto adoption and acceptance.
They actually issued a stable coin where, as you interpret the law, because they're a sovereign, they're neither a person or a corporation, and they've issued a stable coin under their own kind of regulatory scheme, which is interesting to think about.
But okay, so about Puerto Rico, Puerto Rico's inside the realm of the F-35 circling around, yet completely independent from the federal government. That's potentially a birthplace for this whole thing.
So the sub question then would be, okay, so you have a hypothetical preference for Wyoming, maybe Puerto Rico. When does this happen? When do we see the first, in your prediction, Tully, when do we see the first state level government in the United States enshrine in statute the ability for an autonomous corporation, which, by the way, could be an AI as a person as well? It doesn't necessarily have to be an on-chain entity.
I'm not 100% sure, but I thought there were DAO-friendly bills already being passed in Wyoming, specifically for creating these kind of corporate structures that assign control or parts of the control of the fiduciary duties to a DAO.
Yes, there are. We looked into this. Wyoming does allow that. The problem is you're still under the federal SEC issues. But I'll give you this thing. In Panama, there's a couple of other places where you can have foundations that create DAOs, and those are fully decentralized autonomous organizations, and then everything can be run from the DAO. And the DAO owns everything. So it's almost like a trust with digitized crypto-enabled transactions going through it.
You actually don't need these things. I think the key part that you need out of, the federal and the government and laws is that if you participate in the smart contract, that your liabilities are not commingled with everyone else that participates. This is kind of like, I think, either needs to be passed through Congress through the market structure bill or kind of figured out in the courts, is that once that's true, the fact that like you can now participate in these DAOs and things like that, those effectively become code as law, because if the government says that your liabilities are limited, you're not part of this cohort, that you're responsible for everyone's actions that participate in this mechanism, then the only thing that you have is the code then you are solely relying on the code to enforce all the decisions of that thing. So if you go into it and you lose money, tough, right? Like you've actually taken on the risk and there's nobody for you to go after anymore. So it's more like, I don't think we need laws to pass to allow it. What we need is laws or courts to figure out that you don't have liabilities if you participate in these systems, and that's about it. And then they exist just by existing.
You've put your finger on, I think, the core issue for the future of this entire space, which is what does the future of law as code look like? And I think there are sort of maybe two directions, at least two directions I can imagine it going in. One is, I think, what you're articulating, which is in the future, state plus federal law plus a whole bunch of regulations get encoded in something that looks like, future of layer one code. It's basically software. There is another future where future of laws and regulations remain pure natural language, but we have a whole constellation of AI agents that are interpreting them, basically AI lawyers, AI regulators. Do you have a sense of which of those two futures, or maybe door number 3, we're going to find ourselves in?
I'll answer that question. We start with number 2, which is you have AI agents dealing with natural language law. And then over time, we have to develop completely new forms of mechanisms and governance structures to deal with it. Well, those will be on chain.
What about you, Tully?
I think humans in the loop and kind of how our human egos are designed is that you will have this. I think like The Big Short has this awesome scene where the higher up the chain of command you go, the dumber the person, the less they understand about what's happening.
The same applies to podcast hosts, by the way.
Yeah, I think because of just human nature of politics and leadership and all these things, you're going to see the most sophisticated understanding of how this stuff works at the lowest layer, and then it go as the higher up it goes to the court system, to politicians, to regulators, the more broad strokes they have kind of to control it. And my view is like, I don't think you're going to have AI agents in that spot because of human ego. Like, I think humans really, really want big orgs under them.
So I just have to jump on that because I just think it's the coolest thing in the world that you, as an individual engineer, come into the country 14 years ago, whatever, settle in San Fran and invent $100 billion thing out of thin air, just create it out of thin air. And then to figure out how it interacts with the government, a guy, David Sachs, who has nothing to do with the government, ends up in the role kind of overnight. And now you guys figure it out together. Show me any other country on the planet that could ever do that. But it's exactly what you said from The Big Short. You get to any other jurisdiction and the moron factor, in the way makes it impossible to interact. It's just the coolest story.
Hold on. This isn't quite fair. If you take Switzerland, which has been crypto friendly for longer than almost anybody, they passed legislation quite a long time ago, and a huge number of the crypto founders moved there because it was so crypto friendly. Japan is friendly. Now there's an increasing list of countries, Malta, Liechtenstein, et cetera, et cetera. So countries are jumping on board. And a lot of the Binance, et cetera, a lot of these were created in places where they were crypto friendly first, and then they worried about the US later. The US has now jumped on the bandwagon in a big way, which is fantastic, but it's a little bit too little too late for some things. I think in other areas it's going to really take off.